Somalia is one of the most dysfunctional countries on earth, although it sits probably the best geographic location. It is not too rich in natural resources, but in sea trade it is a desirable port at the intersection of main routes. It is no wonder that in the era of decolonization, the Soviet Union provided enormous aid to the country in return for Soviet boots on the ground in Africa. With Soviet support, Somalia turned into the strongest military power on the continent. This is why it shocked the international actors when the Soviet Union turned its back on Somalia almost overnight when a war started. Not only did they turn their back, but the Soviets also sided with Somalia's enemy in that conflict. In an era when both the Soviet Union and the United States tried to secure as many proxies as possible, it was surprising that the United States didn't step in and help Somalia. Britain, France and Germany slammed the door on them too. We are not talking about a landlocked country in the deepest pocket of the jungle, but a country in one of the most strategic locations on earth. Why is it that nobody wants to do business with Somalia? Let me sell Somalia to you, especially if you are one of those superpowers. Somalia is located on the Horn of Africa, a region that oversees not just everything going in and out of the Suez Canal, but almost every exchange between Asia and Africa. This is so much the case that interregional trade started here as early as the Neolithic era. This is not a wasteland. The climate is semi-arid, but the two main rivers, the Juba and Shabelle, never dry out, enabling agriculture. This makes the ports of Somalia an ideal stop for fleets to resupply. Offshore gas and oil reserves were discovered as early as the 1940s, and these reserves are significant on a global scale. I know, I should have started with this. Now your fleet is on its way. And that's exactly what you should do, because other major powers are present in the Arabian Sea and the Indian Ocean. From Somalia you can keep an eye on them easily. The Horn of Africa has a triangular shape, making Somalia easy to protect from land armies. In modern times there is no such thing as safe location, but if you rule the sea, the region is yours. And I said region on purpose. Your competition will face challenges gaining a foothold in the neighborhood when Somalia harbors your fleet. So, why did the colonizers withdraw, and how did the Soviet Union step in? The dissolution of colonial empires is a big topic, but in essence, independence movements got stronger, colonizers went broke in the world wars, and they switched to a different business model. As for Somalia, the Somalis were under British, French, Italian and Ethiopian rule. Somalis are culturally homogeneous compared to other ethnicities in Africa, and their national identity is strong. So, when the decolonization process was completed in 1960, the former Italian and British parts united under the flag of Somalia. If you ask me, just as capital doesn't have loyalty to society, neither does power. Capital wants to pile up more money, power wants more control. Society for them is nothing more than resources to drain. It is hard for a whole society to own the power. Power always shifts to the hands of a group. The difference is how society can harness those in power. In the case of Somalia, those in power strengthened their clans right after unification. A year later, in 1961, this directly led to a coup attempt, which failed, but political discontent remained. Somalia was a democracy, but politics was essentially a clan-based power struggle involving bribery and nepotism. This is where the Soviet Union offered help. The Soviets positioned themselves in the Third World as friends and patrons against Western shenanigans. They offered Somalia and many other countries military training programs. Siad Barre, Somalia's future leader, participated in the program and was convinced that scientific socialism would put an end to Somalia's struggle. So ultimately, he and his movement seized power in a bloodless coup in 1969. Scientific socialism promotes equality among citizens, values merit, aims for equal wealth distribution, and despises nepotism and the rule of the few. So, why did they do the latter? In the framework of the Soviet-Somali partnership between 1969 and 1977, Somalia received 90% of all Soviet aid provided to Africa. The country had no industrial background. It was an agrarian society. Therefore, the Soviets treated the country as a blank canvas for a socialist masterpiece, like you when you play timberboard. They renovated commercial ports. To kickstart industry, they built a meat processing plant in Kismayo, a fish cannery in Las Corée, and a dairy plant in Mogadishu. They established a joint Soviet-Somali fishing company. This type of industrialization suited the characteristics of the country. They built the Berber Naval Base, which was a deep-water port for ships, and an airport with 4,000-meter runway. That's the biggest in Africa. There, they also built a powerful long-range radio communication center. This allowed the Soviets to communicate with their fleet in the Indian Ocean. To protect their new foothold in Africa, they equipped Somalia with hundreds of armored vehicles, artillery, rocket launchers, and anti-aircraft systems. The Air Force was also built from scratch. 50 fighters and some helicopters and transport aircraft were given. All this was supported about 3,000 advisors and other personnel. During this period, Somalia's population grew from 2.9 million to 3.8 million. That is 25% increase in less than a decade. The purpose of the Soviet aid was hidden imperialism, as I will show you in a second. But Siad Barre, the leader of Somalia, treated the Soviet aid as a brotherly gesture. So he became overly confident. So confident that he started a war against a much larger Ethiopia. This war ranks quite high on my stupid wars list. It basically cripples Somalia in every way. The reasoning behind the war was common in history. Siad Barre commanded the strongest military in Africa, and in 1977, Ethiopia's government collapsed, providing a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for Somalia to unite its nation. The Ogaden region is populated by nomadic Somalis, and Ethiopia seized this part in a classic imperialist war. They had no real claim on it, they just wanted it. This happened in the 19th century. So now Siad Barre wanted the Ogaden region back, but he didn't calculate for international relations. Up until the turmoil in Ethiopia, the country was a Western proxy. Its population, prestige and influence were far greater than Somalia's. Ethiopia was the leading voice in African diplomacy. So your guess is right. The Soviet Union saw an opportunity here. Siad Barre annoyed the Soviet Union anyway. It was a typical African scenario where the Soviets provided enormous aid and the African country in question was hesitant to do what the Soviet Union dictated. In every African country the argument was the same. If the Soviet Union intervenes in politics, how is it different from other European colonizers? It was a clever argument, but arguments never mattered in the Soviet Union. So they simply took all their aid and gave it to Ethiopia in a swift move. This happened when Somalia attacked Ethiopia, despite Soviet objections. It was a shocking but brilliant move, as the Soviet Union now acted as the ambassador of peace and made Ethiopia its political debtor. Siad Barre desperately flew to Moscow to meet Brezhnev, but Brezhnev didn't meet him. And this humiliation didn't play out well at home. Somalia ran out of ammunition and petrol quite fast, and Siad Barre's competitors in politics were quick to strike at him. In 1978, the Mujahideen coup attempt highlighted there is no consensus behind him. It was essential for political survival to find a donor in the Western Bloc. This situation developed at the end of the 1970s. By this time, the Soviet Union and the USA had fought several proxy wars. The Soviet Union wanted to spread its ideology and political influence. The United States wanted to stop the Soviet Union and extend its own economic influence. So in the middle of the Ogaden War, Siad Barre's hope for US aid was not entirely unfounded. By helping Somalia with weapons and ammunition, the US could have secured a strategic port for its fleet to monitor the Middle East more closely. France, Britain and West Germany could have simply benefited from arms sales. But this shows clearly how little Siad Barre understood international relations. All the proxy wars of the Cold War were internal civil wars. Communists wanted to take over a government somewhere with Soviet support, and then the US stepped in and helped the old elite. But stepping into an international conflict was a different story. It carried the risk of escalation into a world war. This was something neither the USA nor the Soviets wanted. The Soviet Union specifically forbade Ethiopia from chasing the Somali army into Somali territories. The real poison was that Somalia was violating the Organization of African Unity Charter regarding colonial borders. The charter adopted the principle of respecting colonial era borders upon independence to maintain stability. By supporting Barre, both the Soviets or the United States would have alienated every other African ally who feared their own borders being challenged. Things get even more complicated here. For the Soviet Union, the Horn of Africa was a desirable region, but they had other priorities. Centuries-old Russian geopolitical interest was to get warm water ports in South Asia. In 1978, things were set in motion in that region. In Iran, the pro-Western regime faced a revolt which installed an anti-Western regime in 1979. In Afghanistan, in 1978, a communist coup overthrew the government but couldn't control the country, so in 1979, the Soviet Union started a desperate military intervention that lasted until 1989. It also decreased the significance of Somalia that the United States was in the finishing phase of building its massive naval base at Diego Garcia. The benefit of a Somali naval base simply wasn't worth the political cost of supporting an aggressor. Siad Barre simply should have kept supporting the separatist rebellion in Ogaden patiently. Before the full invasion, Barre supported the Western Somali Liberation Front. Throughout 1976 and early 1977, the WSLF conducted guerrilla operations that successfully pushed the Ethiopian army out of much of the countryside. Barre's official line was that Somalia wasn't involved, but by losing his patience and starting an open war, he left no option for the world to give aid. Well, that was the story. Thanks for watching.